Later in this episode, the friend that this testimonial is regarding shares his insights, so I want to put a little message up front so that if you're inspired to check out the whole video, you'll be able to catch that piece. Hello, friend. In this episode, I'm actually going to give a little bit of a testimonial regarding somebody in my experience here that I've been doing some work with mind-wise. So it'll be a little bit of a testimonial, but it's all from my perspective at the moment. Because some of you are going to be able to benefit from it as it is. Others of you will already recognize how this makes perfect sense. So a friend of mine, for I'll say 7-ish years, since I met him, one of the biggest sore spots that I was aware of, due to the conversations we had was his career and his work. He was unhappy with the work environment. He was unhappy with the co-workers. But not just unhappy, deeply unhappy. And it reminded me a lot of myself, actually, when I was younger, before I had any spiritual, this is prior to any type of spiritual yearning that I was aware of. I used to work at a place, and I used to just hate it. You probably won't hear me use the word hate too often. That was the way I was interpreting it. That was the way I was interpreting it back then. I was largely ego, very little spiritual awareness. Any spiritual awareness I had back then maybe shined through as just being a good guy at times, but not being very mindful or anything. Not having any awareness, that's for sure. Very undeveloped, very immature spiritually. And I saw the correlation between how I used to be and my friend here. And I would make examples to say, hey, because now I can look back now at my this job that I had so much disdain for back in the day, and I've said to this friend, I could go back there and not only not feel hate for it, but I could actually enjoy it, because I recognize now that I was doing it all in my mind. Everything I was doing in my mind was cultivating just a negative creation there in all ways, because of the way that I was perceiving everything, the way that I was interpreting everything. And I don't think that was, I don't even know if today it's really received that's the truth of it. So fast forward to all the way up to, in my experience of my friend is, he has the tendency to follow the carnal interpretation, and the low vibration interpretations, whether it's shame, whether it's unworthiness, guilt, you name it. All of these suggestions, kind of negative suggestions of the ego. He was anger, frustration. That was kind of his trend. That was his tendency. And I've seen times where I'd kind of, shed some light on things and hopefully give him a little bit of inspiration and the tools to apply it, and we would see changes temporarily. But I stopped talking to him. Not that we stopped, but I just hadn't talked to him for a period of time. And then when we had reconnected, he said that he was in the process of leaving this job that he had been so thoroughly unenjoying for all these years. And at this point, I had developed my my psychic connection, which is really spiritual connection anyways. And so he told me that he was leaving his job. He had a new job to go to. And the first thing Spirit said to me was, we take ourselves with us everywhere we go. And what Spirit was meaning by that was, it wasn't necessarily the environment at his old job that he was running away from. He didn't know this yet. But it was his influence on the environment that was creating and manifesting. It was his thoughts about this place that were creating and manifesting this expression of discomfort and dissatisfaction in that workplace. So I didn't share that with him at the moment, but what I did was kind of encourage, hey, are you doing the best you can with your mind? I probably planted some seeds, I don't recall specifically, but I remember him not thinking that there was any way, from my perspective, that he could be responsible for what was going on. Because in his mind, he was treating everybody courteously, or with courtesy, with kindness, with consideration. But he wasn't receiving that back. His co-workers were saying some very unloving things to him that he had shared with me. But now, what he didn't understand was, because he thought that he was, by being nice to those people, they should be nice to him. And that wasn't what was happening, so he couldn't understand it. But what anybody who had spent a sufficient amount of time with him was able to recognize, if they knew what to look for, was he was filling himself up with negative self-talk all day long. He didn't need other people to treat him badly. He was already treating himself badly. He beat them to the punch. So he was already manifesting this in his mind, and they were just validating it. They're just showing up to validate it. That's manifestation 101 right there. You think the thought, and you think the thought, and yet you're creating. You can't turn creation off. So he left his job, went to a new job. It didn't work out for whatever reason, and we continued to talk, because at this point, I was seeing this as, this was my brother, and my brother's in need here, and he was in a pretty deep sense of stress. You can imagine not having a job after having that job for so long prior, not enjoying it, but still having it. You know what I mean? So a big potential source of stress, and I could see how he was creating these things. And I was thinking, why doesn't he return to this old job? Because he's really hanging himself out to dry. I think he was maybe a month and a half, 2 months without a job. I'm thinking, why don't you just return to your old job and at least have the money to live while you're figuring this out, because it can be figured out. And Spirit told me it was pride. Pride was getting in the way. So I reached out to him and I said something along the lines, or the conversation was something along the lines of, why don't you just go back to the old job? Is it pride? Is it a matter of pride? And he confirmed that it was. So I continued to work with him on the mind stuff, and he started to make some gains, and I believe he started to do some affirmations maybe around this point, if I recall correctly. And he got to a point where his desire to get things sorted and overcome the stress was more important than his pride. And he bit the bullet, and although he had some carnal resistance to it, he went back to his old job. He got his old job back. Now, what's interesting is, before he left that job in the first place, there was a position that he was interested in, that he expressed interest in. And the higher-ups the managers, the authorities, whatever they are, denied it. They wouldn't allow it. They give these ideas of why he couldn't have it, or explanations of why it wasn't for him at that time. He came back to this new job. Sorry, he returned to his old job. And within a week or two, I believe, they offered him this position. Now, he had already begun working on his mind to an extent and already doing affirmations to an extent, not really believing in them, but just applying them as he was inspired. And it was a week or two into his return to his old job where they offered him this new position that he was trying to get before. And I remember asking him, I said, if you knew that you would have to quit your job, go through all this stress for a month and a half, trying to find other jobs, not be able to get something, to return to this job, and then get this new position, would it have been worth it? And he said yes. And God in my mind said, mic drop. He just created what he couldn't get before through changing his mindset. This isn't the big piece yet, by the way. This isn't the big piece of this testimonial. I kind of overlooked that until it just came back up. It's not to be dismissed, though. It's not to be dismissed. So I'm with my friend. I'm working with my friend on his mindset. If he was here on this call, he'd probably say that I was maybe overbearing and overwhelming at points. I don't know if he thought that, but I was being his ally, trust me. And his first week of work... Oh, by the way, after God said, mic drop, God said, the ball's in your court. What does balls in your court mean? What you're going to do now influences how it goes from here. The ball's in your court. To clarify, what you do in your mind, in your consciousness, is going to determine what happens from here. So he had his first week in this new position that he wanted. And he was tail spinning. He was tail spinning in the mind. I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. It's too much. Some of this is me paraphrasing. And I remember saying to him, if you're trying to convince me of those things, you can't, because I know what's going on here. You can't convince me of those things. You are enough. You are worthy. Change your mind. Change your mind. So I was making the efforts to renew his mind. At the end of that week, again, this was he was in the new position that he wanted. At the end of that week, he had gone through so many lows, beating himself up, negative self-talk. I said, nobody's telling you these things. Your managers aren't telling you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. Your partner isn't, your friends aren't. In fact, I'm here saying the exact opposite. But you're just really trying to convince yourself. And he didn't believe it, and we had some long talks. And it got to the point where I explained it as clearly as I could, and I said, as I've heard another teacher say it before, this is how it works. When you think a sad thought, you create sadness. Now, this is what Spirit always gives to me. This isn't what I've heard another teacher say. When you think a happy thought, you create happiness. Our thoughts precede our creation. Rich people think rich thoughts. Poor people think poor thoughts. Healthy people think healthy thoughts. Sick people think sick thoughts. I explained it to him. Beyond that, I'm just giving a little bit of example here. And I said, I don't care if you believe it, do it. Prove me wrong. Prove Jesus. You reap what you sow. Prove Jesus wrong. Prove God wrong. Prove Spirit wrong. Maintain a happy, positive mindset in your self-talk. Affirm that all these things are going to go fine, or even better than fine. Build yourself up. Prove me wrong. Show me that this doesn't work. Well, this was his second week of work, and at the end of the second week, I said, how does this week that just happened rate in your career at this job? Something along those lines. And he said something along the lines of, this was my best week at work. And I said to him, now do you recognize how much the mind is responsible for these things? And this is where this is why I haven't asked him for a testimonial on this just yet, because he's still logicizing. He's still carnalizing. He's coming up with logical reasons why what just happened. For example, the one reason he would say is, well, I worked there for 10 and a half years. And when I left, maybe they recognized my value, maybe they recognized my worth, and now they're just treating me better. And what I said to him was, you're in the position that you wanted. You created that. This week here was potentially the best week of your career. Last week you were in this position that you wanted. And you were in a full tailspin. The only thing that changed was your mindset. So these things take introspection. They take examination. And it shows you how the carnal mind can confuse love for hate, hate for love, divinity for undivinity, for happenstance. Are we really going to confuse divinity for happenstance? Yeah, the carnal mind does that. That's what the carnal mind does, because it's enmity to God, meaning it does not know. It cannot know. So we have to look at it from the perspective of divinity. If we want a divine perspective, we have to align with divine. And what I said to my friend was, if you still don't believe, what you could do is return to your negative thought process. Be as thickly negative and self-demeaning as you were prior. And go back to your job here and you'll see it won't be the best week of work again. I said, but you don't want that for you and I don't want that for you. And Spirit reminded me at that point, no amount of evidence can convince us of that which we do not want to believe. Right? So I was just kind of making the example in jest. I wouldn't honestly encourage that. I actually avoid certain topics on this channel because of things like that. I don't want to emphasize the dark because it's very real disconnect and it doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us to focus on it when we can focus on the light, when we're mindful enough. So that's what I mean by that. But I thought this story was just a beautiful example of transformation and transcendence. And I'm curious, I don't ask this often, but for those of you who are inspired to comment, do you recognize God's role in this? Do you recognize how this was divinity coming through, working through his mind, how manifestation works? Do you recognize how that was exactly what happened? Because some people are ready for it, some people are in denial of it. All it takes is examination. If you examined your mind all day long and watched what happened after you thought the thoughts that you have, that's what we're meant to do. And it will prove itself, it validates itself. It's undeniable. You don't think a happy thought and randomly experience sadness. Ever. Ever. Creation is perfect. Perfect. Creation is more perfect than your understanding of what perfection means. Spirit just threw that one in there. All right. So hopefully, I did this story justice in my friend's eyes. There's lessons to be learned, and applications to be gained from this story. This is a story of triumph, my friends. And it may seem trivial to some, but trust me, it's not trivial to me, and it's not trivial to my friend. You know? And this could be you if you would refine your processes. Okay. I'll close it there. Blessings, my friend. I love you. You're amazing. We'll talk soon. And here is the little insight from the friend that this story is regarding.
I never thought you were overbearing or anything like that. I thought your unconditional persistence must have just had passion on your end, and obviously you felt crazy strong about it, and you weren't trying to sell me anything other than my own wellness and well-being, which is love and appreciation. So I thought, let me take this as serious as he's taking it, and we'll see what the outcome is. So that's what I was kind of thinking during the whole time of before I left the job, while I was gone from the job, and then coming back from the job. But you did real good with recalling a lot of things and sharing the whole story.
If you found any value in this episode, please consider sharing it with your circle. If you're interested in receiving some guidance, you can contact me at aswithinsoul@gmail.com. If you're inspired to offer a donation, you can also use the email aswithinsoul@gmail.com.